Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Burkina Faso's leader vows a crackdown on armed extremists as he pays tribute to victims a day after dozens are killed in the north in an explosion that targets a supply convoy. Also, the UN warns that Somalia is on the brink of famine for the second time in just over a decade, and that time is running out to save lives. And an all-girl Ethiopian skate crew is carving out a place for their members by grinding away at outdated local stereotypes about what women want. But first, Burkina Faso's ruling juntas vowed to defeat armed jihadists after at least 35 people were killed on Monday when a supply convoy was blown up in the north. Thousands have been killed over 7 years of insurgency. Extremists are reckoned to control large parts of the country and are intensifying attacks. Sophie Lamotte has more.
Yet another deadly explosion in Burkina Faso this Monday. A convoy which was escorted by the army and carrying supplies to some of the cities that are occupied by terrorist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic States. One of those vehicles hit a landmine. Locals report a strong explosion and some flames that engulfed the vehicle, and the death toll is high. At least 35 people are dead and 37 wounded. They were all civilians, some of them traders going back to Ouagadougou to get some supplies, and others were students going back to the capital for the start of the new school year. The explosion took place on the road connecting Djibo and Buganza, and it's on that very same road that another explosion took place early August that killed 15 soldiers. Humanitarians on the ground report daily attacks, and they say the situation is very tense, especially in the north of the country. 28 NGOs recently came together to share some new figures of the humanitarian crisis taking place in Burkina Faso. They find that 2 million people are now displaced across the country. That's about 1 in 10 people directly affected by the conflict. They also found that food insecurity had doubled since last year. And overall, they're calling on the international community to step up and to respond to Burkina Faso's worst humanitarian crisis in a decade.
Sophie Lamotte there for us. Now, Somalia is on the brink of famine for the second time in just over a decade. The UN's children's agency, UNICEF, has warned that hundreds of children have died at nutrition centres, and the UN's humanitarian chief said that he was shocked by the suffering he saw during a recent visit. Laurent Berstecker has more.
A historic and unprecedented catastrophe in the making. That's how the UN's humanitarian chief described the situation in Somalia after visiting the epicenter of the country's hunger crisis.
I've been shocked to my core these past few days by the level of pain and suffering we see so many Somalis enduring. Famine is at the door, and today we are receiving a final warning.
After 4 consecutive failed rainy seasons driven by climate change, Somalia is currently in the midst of a historic drought. The food crisis was recently compounded by the war between Ukraine and Russia, 2 countries from which Somalia used to import over 90% of its wheat. The UN says some 7.8 million Somalis are currently in need of aid, including over 200,000 people at imminent risk of dying from hunger. And while the international body stopped just short of declaring an official famine, it warned the situation was likely to deteriorate further and urged humanitarian actors to step up relief efforts.
The only thing that will prevent famine in these parts of south-central Somalia is a massive humanitarian response. If we are unable to significantly scale up response, there will be significant loss of life.
The last time an official famine was declared in Somalia in 2011, over 250,000 people died of starvation. The UN now warns things could get even worse, with a 5th consecutive dry season placing the country into uncharted territory.
The US has congratulated Kenya on its peaceful presidential elections after, on Monday, the Supreme Court upheld Vice President William Ruto's victory. His main rival, Raila Odinga, had challenged the result but says that he'll be standing by the court's decision. Many Kenyans are keen to move on from last month's vote. Odinga's failed in his bid for the top job 5 times, but despite his latest and probably last loss, he's arguably still had a significant impact on the country's history.
I doubt there's a person who will get the space Raila will get, because the struggle he has been engaged in, though not complete, has yielded a lot. In fact, I dare say, even the president-elect is feeding off the back of Raila, because the measures that have been put in place to ensure we have a serious electoral system is almost single-handedly Raila's effort.
The FNDC opposition party in Guinea has accused the ruling junta of using weapons of war, guns and arbitrary arrest to crack down on pro-democracy activists. Demonstrators clashed with security forces in Conakry on Monday on the first anniversary of a military coup. The junta has promised to hand over power to elected civilians within 3 years. Sam Bradpeace tells us more.
Guinea's junta has proved polarising. 1 year on since the soldiers took over, this group of friends are debating their record at a cafe nestled in the capital, Conakry. Some are enthused, others completely disillusioned.
The CNRD came and began completely rebuilding the state. Creating a court charged with tackling economic and financial misconduct was also very good.
For a year, we have been stuck. We've been frozen. Nothing is moving forward. I think that the CNRD taking power in the first place, even before we start talking about the record, is a shame.
Many welcomed Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya when he first took power, but that feeling has since faded. Protests have rocked the country in recent months. Members of the opposition and civil society decried the initial coup, the ban on demonstrations, and the weaponization of the justice system. This politician initially supported the CNRD, but now he argues that the timeline for transitioning back to democracy must be accelerated.
A 36-month deadline has been imposed on the people of Guinea. But this is a transitional government without a mandate. The transition shouldn't take more than 15 or 18 months. So to sum up, the record is negative. They want to stay in power forever, but the people will oppose it.
The government defends its record and says it will transition to democracy in good time.
A charter has been published. A National Transitional Council has assumed the responsibility of the National Assembly. And the country's administration is largely apolitical.
1 year on from the coup, political dialogue has completely collapsed in Guinea.
At least one person was killed on Tuesday in eastern DR Congo during protests against UN peacekeepers. Troops passing through Beni in North Kivu fired warning shots at crowds, and the victim was reportedly killed by a stray bullet. Frustration over persistent violence from armed groups has spiked this year. Violence has cost lives and disrupted the education of displaced children. Take a look.
Giselle Bazoubafit was taking her children to their first day of school when they were stopped on the way by a large crowd of protesters. These displaced families were refusing to leave the classrooms where they've been living and sleeping for several months.
I thought I was taking my children to school, but we have to stop here. The displaced people decided that our children will not study because they need a place to sleep.
Like in many other schools in Rutshuru territory, these classrooms were transformed into makeshift dorms to welcome refugees fleeing the M23 insurgency. And even in other schools with available space, the start of the new school year was disturbed by displaced persons who stormed classrooms to demand equal access to education for their children.
We are surprised to see our children abandoned like this. We feel that the state has forgotten them. They want some children to study, but not those who have been displaced.
Many of these families were hoping to return home by September, but ongoing fighting between the military and M23 rebels in North Kivu means they'll have to wait a while longer. Local authorities have vowed to tackle the issue of education and say they're doing everything they can to send all children back to school as soon as possible.
And now we hear from some of Ethiopia's first all-out skater girls who are part of a crew in Addis. Members from different backgrounds come together to challenge stereotypes and pull some pretty sick moves. Take a look.
Every Saturday, these skaters meet to learn new tricks. How to nail a landing, how to find their balance, and how to push back against gendered stereotypes.
So when you being a woman or a girl, it's very hard. Even to skate around the boys, it's kind of really hard because people think that like girls should have to help their parents at the house.
The all-female group was founded by Sasina Shalar 3 years ago after she broke away from the non-profit Ethiopia Skate. Since then, it has taught more than 150 girls to skate.
It's not really common for a girl to start skating, and because people don't support you, but somebody had to be the first, some group had to start, and we were the first one, and I feel honored to be part of that.
In a country grappling with an ongoing civil war, opportunities for young people can be scarce. Shalar and her co-founder Mickey Asfor hope that they can provide a positive outlet for pent-up frustrations.
The girls need more attention on different type of extreme sports. So that's why the project is important for us. So there are a lot of girls in the streets with no jobs, and a lot of girls who need more activities to be busy on than spending their time in bad areas and doing bad things. So we give them time here to teach them how to skateboard.
In this pocket of capital Addis Ababa, the girls are very much on board with claiming their place on the ramps.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Pollution from the oil business is devastating Gabon.
On a enlevé ça parce qu'il y a trop de brut. C'est trop.
J'étais pêcheur, j'ai dû arrêter.
Activists are speaking out about constant leaks.
Il y a un pipe là-bas qui a cédé.
Du pétrole brut s'écoulait dans la nature sur un rayon de plus de 400 à 500 mètres.
But what's behind these successive spills? Our observers in Gabon bring you first-hand accounts of an environmental catastrophe. Don't miss The Observers on France 24 and France24.com.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches. Bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.